Anastasia is the name of an animated movie by Don Bluth and Gary Goldman from 1997. This was an attempt by 20th Century Fox to get a proper animation studio off the ground to compete with Disney. And it was a big hit at the time, and I think people continue to have a lot of affection for it. I had never seen it until recently as I journey through these animated movies that were produced by studios other than Disney. And I think that this movie is really good. It has some of the best looking hand-drawn animation that you'll ever see. But I ultimately think the story behind the movie is a lot more interesting than the movie itself. So let's go ahead and look into that. By the mid-90s, Hollywood had animation fever, and all the big studios were investing real money into getting full, proper animation studios off the ground to try to compete with Disney. And I've chronicled this in lots of videos from the past. DreamWorks is the one that really succeeded and lasted with The Prince of Egypt and Ants, but Warner Brothers tried it with Quest for Camelot and The Iron Giant. What you find over and over happening is these studios put a lot of money into it, they hire the right people, and then they just kind of lose interest very quickly. That was the case with Warner Brothers after The Iron Giant failed at the box office, and that was certainly the case with 20th Century Fox after Anastasia. Even though Anastasia was a hit, it succeeded. It did exactly what they needed it to do, and they hired Don Bluth to spearhead this whole thing. After Anastasia, they let him direct Titan AE, and that was a big disappointment, and then that was that. They shutter the studio. But Don Bluth, if you don't know, one of the most important figures in American animation. He was the first American animator to make theatrical feature films that really did compete with Disney. In the 80s, he had The Secret of Nim, and then An American Tale, The Land Before Time, All Dogs Go to Heaven. These were all independently produced movies made for modest budgets that made a lot of money at the box office. I mean, made good money at the box office, good returns on investment. And after that, he made a series of low-budget animated movies that did very poorly both commercially and critically. Rockadoodle, Thumbelina, A Troll in Central Park, and The Pebble and the Penguin. So he had that run of unremarkable movies that I'm sure people out there have a lot of affection for. I've never seen any of these. But Anastasia represented his first chance to work directly for a big studio with a big budget and with the resources that came along with that big budget. The Fox executive who spearheaded this whole thing, his name was Bill Mechanic. He was obsessed with turning the story of Anastasia into an animated musical. And this might be because Fox owned the 1956 movie starring Ingrid Bergman, a movie called Anastasia. Ingrid Bergman won an Oscar for playing Anastasia in that movie. And it's like, we can just remake this movie into an animated musical with like fun sidekick animals. And that's exactly what they did. When Don Bluth hears that this is the idea, he's like, well, that's a weird idea. I mean, that's kind of a weird story to make into a kid's movie. So Anastasia, about the real Anastasia. Okay, the Romanovs were the ruling family of Russia, of the old Russian Empire, the family for whom the word autocrat was invented, a despicable family of inbred tyrants. They enslaved millions of people, presided over an empire of blood and plunder. The feudalism was still going on basically into the 20th century under the czars, under the family of Nicholas Romanov. The last emperor of this dynasty was Tsar Nicholas II, the father of Anastasia. He ran this country into ruin, made the insane decision to go lead the war effort, lead World War I himself personally out on the battlefield, just cosplay as like a military guy. It was a disaster, and his country was burning to the ground. You will not find examples of more unequal societies in the history of the world than Russia under the reign of the Romanovs. Nicholas and Alexandra, they had a lot of daughters, but they failed to produce a male heir until they had Alexei, the crown prince. He was going to be the heir of the Russian throne, except he was a sickly, hemophiliac little boy. Okay, so while Nicholas is off pretending to be a general and Alexandra is, ruling at court, she enlists the help of a man named Grigory Rasputin, a mystic priest. Supposedly he can heal the boy. Now, this is its own sprawling story, the story of Rasputin. I'll just jump to the part where there's a faction of Russian nobles at court who do not like Rasputin, and so they plot to murder him, and they do that. They assassinate him, but the famous popular version of the story is first they poison his food and it doesn't do anything. Then they poison his wine and it has no effect. And so they just shoot him a bunch of times and then throw his body into the river. And so because of who he is and because of the sort of mystical vibes around this man, it's like this man exists on a plane between the worlds of the living and the dead. And this movie, Don Bluth's movie, Anastasia, has Rasputin as its main villain. voiced by Christopher Lloyd, and it has these like delightful images of like his body parts are falling off of him, because just like the real Rasputin, it's like he was living dead, or he existed in both worlds simultaneously. The movie Anastasia. It opens at a ball in 1916, and Rasputin invades the ball. He has been exiled from court, exiled from Russia, but he comes back to yell at them, and he's made some sort of deal with a devil to get like devil powers so that he can curse the Romanov family forever. He curses the Romanov family forever, and the form that the curse takes, the revenge, Rasputin's revenge, comes in the form of the Russian Revolution. Now, I had absolutely no idea that any of this was in this movie. Like, what an insane thing to make a movie about. What an insane thing to say caused the Russian Revolution. Like, the movie's idea is like, the Russian Revolution, a wizard did it. A wizard made it happen. It would be like if you made a movie about the American Civil War and said like, what, slavery? No. That's not what happened. A magician cursed America, and that's why they had a civil war. Anyway, in real life, Rasputin was dead by 1916. The following year, the Russian revolutions happened. First, the February Revolution, then the October Revolution. First, the royal family is removed from power. Then, ultimately, the Bolshevik Party takes power. Russia's taken out of the war. And eventually, communism is installed and the Soviet Union begins. In 1918, the entire royal family was executed, but the Soviet government handled it very weirdly. For years, lied about the nature under which it went down, who did it, where the bodies were buried. This fueled all kinds of conspiracy theories. The most notable was that the popular idea that the youngest Romanov, the Grand Duchess Anastasia, or the youngest daughter, survived, was still alive, was still somewhere out there. So for decades, there were famous instances of Anastasia imposters. The most well-known was a woman called Anna Anderson. She maintained all her life that she was the real Anastasia. DNA evidence in the 1990s showed no, she was not. She was a fraud, and indeed the real Anastasia was dead along with the rest of her family. Okay, so that's what actually happened. But in Don Bluth's movie, things are a little bit different. So I should say I do not care about historical accuracy in movies. It's totally like that. I separate that from my evaluation of how good the movie is. You shouldn't be getting your history from movies anyway. I just think it's really funny, the decisions they made about how to represent history here. The movie so obviously wants to be a Disney movie, to have the look and the feel, the vibes of the great modern Disney princess movies, most especially Beauty and the Beast. And indeed, the first voice you hear in Anastasia is that of Angela Lansbury, who played Mrs. Potts in Beauty and the Beast. Here, she's the Dowager Empress Maria Romanov, and she is the narrator of the film. She is lamenting the lost world of Tsarist Russia. There, beauty, grand music everywhere, romance was in the air, and dancing. And the movie agrees with her. Like, never mind that there's a world war going on, that the country's burning down to the ground. Honestly, this is a little bit like the opening of Gone with the Wind, where this like grand on-screen text announces like, this is a story of a world lost. Sad. It's so sad, that grand old world of the American South before slavery was outlawed. Then Rasputin comes into the ball and messes everything up, and we jump ahead the following year to the Russian revolutions. This violent mob is coming for the royal family, but Anastasia manages to escape with the help of a servant boy, but then she is separated from her family, specifically with the Angela Lansbury grandmother, and she just sort of disappears into the crowd forever. And as a result of the trauma here, she develops amnesia and ends up at an orphanage. So we jump ahead. There's a CGI sweep over St. Petersburg showing it industrializing in the years ahead. And then these workers sing a song about how their lives are absolute misery ever since the revolution. And they hope that Anastasia is somewhere still out there and she can take the throne and restore the Romanovs, and they'll get the old Russia back. So you know very well what this movie's politics are. We meet Anastasia now. She is voiced by Meg Ryan. She is an amnesiac. She doesn't remember who she is. She calls herself Anya. Then we also meet Dimitri, voiced by John Cusack. And these two hook up with each other because he is a con man who is trying to hire a young woman to play Anastasia so that they can go and meet the Dowager Empress, who's living in exile in Paris looking for her granddaughter Anastasia. But, you know, it could be anyone, because the last time she saw her granddaughter, she was just a little girl. So if we can get a woman who looks vaguely like what Anastasia used to look like, we can claim that reward money. So he sees Anya, Anastasia and thinks, oh, you'd be perfect. So he starts training her about how to act like a princess and act like the real Anastasia. All the while, wait a minute, maybe she is the real Anastasia, and maybe we were falling in love with each other. We also keep checking in with Rasputin. He's still alive. He is reigning in this underworld sort of place. He is voiced by Christopher Lloyd. He is an absolute delight. He's so much fun. Christopher Lloyd gets to go maximum Christopher Lloyd. And the character animation is so much fun. His villain song is my favorite part of the movie. I love his Greek chorus of Minions from Hell. But what I don't like and I don't think works in the movie is the comic relief sidekicks, especially this evil bat named Bartok, who is voiced by Hank Azaria, doing sort of a Peter Lorre impression or like a Ren from Ren and Stimpy sort of voice. I love Hank Azaria, but I just don't think this works. This kind of reminds me of Pocahontas or The Hunchback of Notre Dame. Where it's like, you know, the Disney rules of the time. You have to have cute sidekicks and you have to have comic relief, but the tones never feel right to me in any of these movies. I think those other two movies are probably better than Anastasia, but it's just interesting to watch these movies all in sequence and see that at the time it was like, well, we know that there's a formula to this. We're telling more serious stories, more sedate, more like subdued, not so funny stories, but we still have to have the comic relief sidekicks and the cute animals and stuff. It's just kind of interesting to take a look at. But anyway, they eventually reunite Anastasia with her grandmother. I think it's pretty moving when they reunite. I really did wonder though, like, is this going to end with Anastasia like retaking the throne of Russia and kicking the communists out in this alternate timeline of history? But no, Don Bluth just has the movie end with Anastasia marrying John Cusack on a boat. I think that this movie has a lot to recommend it. It looks incredible. It's some of the best hand-drawn animation you will ever see, and it's a great look at an alternate history where Don Bluth got to work more with big budgets, where he didn't have to make The Pebble and the Penguin and Thumbelina and all of that. I wish he had gotten more chances, but the industry was changing very, very quickly and traditional animation was going away all in favor of CGI. So like, to look at the movies from this period of time, or to look at something like The Prince of Egypt, is like you're looking at this sad lost world. It's kind of like looking at the Romanovs like having a ball as before everything about the world changes. So yeah, tons of good stuff about this movie. If I have a major criticism, it's that I don't think it all necessarily coheres together, and I think that the story of Anastasia and her mysterious past is way more interesting than the love story with her and Dmitri, even though the movie thinks that that's the real key to everything. But I really did enjoy this movie. Now, what I would like to hear from people about is if they grew up with this movie. If you grew up with Anastasia, did you have any awareness of the real world history of did you know anything about Russia or the Russian Revolution or the real Anastasia? Did you notice any of the particularities about that, or notice like, this movie takes place in a more recent world, in a more like real world than the other animated movies of the time?